there's like an intangible trust that we're building with the market that like can't be replicated. The founders are doing a bunch of other stuff other than being psychos in their company. And like, I think if you want to build an exceptional generational company, you have to have that. The CRO goes like, oh, the number's too high. It's not fair. It's like, dude, fair is not a thing here. It's like the number's too high, which means for the business, we are going to make suboptimal short-term decisions. We are going to sacrifice building enterprise value. And therefore, here's the alternative path that I think we should consider.
All right, I'm here with Kyle Norton, the CRO at Owner.com. Owner.com is a software platform used by over 10,000 restaurants to help them grow sales. It's a suite of different products, I would say. There's a website builder, marketing automation, online ordering, loyalty program, a bunch of things that restaurants need to grow. Started in 2018 by CEO Adam Guild. They recently raised $120 million Series C. Kyle is also the co-host of the Revenue Leadership Podcast by Pavilion. And before joining Owner.com in 2022, he was Director of Revenue at Shopify and co-owner of Open Mat Mixed Martial Arts, an MMA academy in Toronto, which you don't do anymore. So
No,
first, before I have that first question, anything to kind of correct, amend in that intro?
No, I think you got it. I mean, Owner really was started in 2020. It was like a very different product before then. COVID basically wiped it out. So Adam rebuilt the business from scratch, essentially. I think from 2018 to 2020, he got it over $1 million ARR. That went to complete zero. And so he rebuilt the business from scratch starting in March 2020, relaunched it like later in the year, and then within a year had over $1 million in ARR again, and with a completely different customer base and completely different product. So I really talk about the company being like started in 2020.
Okay,
So,
yeah, makes sense. I went off of what was on his LinkedIn profile, but
yeah. But
cool.
that's the full story. So we've been owner since then, basically.
Now, I do have a couple questions about Adam, but do you still practice MMA, BJJ, any of that stuff?
No. I had 2 knee surgeries, almost had to have a back surgery, and that was it for me. I had to hang it up. I miss the sport a lot. I credit a lot of my career success to lessons I learned in martial arts, the acceptance of failure and pain as a part of the learning process, and just understanding how to practice and how to get good at something with like very disciplined, focused practice is something I still apply to my sales teams to this day. Like a lot of our sales training is built around the principles of practice in sport, which I really learned from my mixed martial arts career. So yeah, I bring those lessons with me, although I do miss.
I was going to ask about that because people say this thing that like it teaches you grit and those things, and I always wonder where I'm like, does it really teach you grit, or is it similar to sales, maybe where maybe it doesn't necessarily teach you grit, but it just attracts people who naturally have grit, and those are the people who just stick around?
There's definitely selection bias. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's certainly selection bias, and I think there are people who start the sport, are interested in it, and ultimately give up because it is a really difficult one to learn. Like, you could learn how to play volleyball and you can be bad at it and lose, but there's no like physical cost. But with jiu-jitsu or boxing or wrestling, like there's a physical cost to not being good at that thing. Like you're just losing and you're getting physically beaten up, and you are on the receiving end of somebody else physically dominating you, which has like a very different psychological impact than like losing at a volleyball game or a soccer match.
Yeah.
And so, people do definitely churn out of the sport who don't have enough grit. But I certainly think if you've got enough to stick with it, and if you're at a gym, like the type of gym we were trying to build was one that was more welcoming to beginners, and it was less of sort of like a Shark Tank meathead type of thing, because we were
Elitist,
in
yeah.
downtown Toronto. Like, we attracted dentists and lawyers and tech people, because once you can get people over the hump, the sport gives you so much. It's like a fascinating physical chess game, and there's just like so many incredible lessons. And so I had nowhere near the resilience or grit before doing martial arts that I did after. And after, now you sort of feel like you can do anything. Like, you go in as a white belt just getting the crap kicked out of you, and then
That's
you
where I'm at
emerge.
right now.
Yeah, there you go. And then you emerge like 3 or 5 or 7 years later, and you can physically overwhelm somebody that's 50 pounds bigger than you, that is like much more athletic, and just the sense of confidence and accomplishment is like very significant. So, like a lot of my confidence in life to, think I can do whatever I put my mind to and achieve whatever I want. I do
Yeah.
attribute to martial arts. I would tell like anybody, if your body can handle it, like, do jujitsu. It's especially founders. I think it's such an incredible sport for founders, because there's so much depth to the chess game of jujitsu. And like, I'm such a big believer to this day in physical fitness as a part of being like a corporate athlete and performing well as an executive. A couple of days ago, I hit my like 1,000th day in a row of working out, and I like, I got a cold plunge in my
Consecutive?
house. Yeah, consecutive.
Wow. Okay.
Some of them are like just yoga days and like mobility stuff, so I'm not like
Sure.
crushing myself every day. But like, I was in the cold plunge today at 5:50 whatever, and then I rode my bike into work, and I like it. It's a lot of the reason why I think I can sustain the tempo I operate at. Like, I've been operating at a very high RPM for a very long time, and I've very rarely felt like I was like burning out. The only time I felt like I was burning out was actually when I was like, um, off of my health path after
Hmm.
my second knee surgery. Wasn't going to go back to the sport. It was traveling a lot for work, like going out and like eating and drinking a lot. That was the only time I really felt like I was on the verge of burnout. But like, I've got 2 young kids, and we're in the like crazy startup mode, and I feel like I could do this forever, but I attribute that to, like, I sleep 8 hours a night every single night, and I try to dial in my sleep hygiene, and I work out every day. And I think like that's a really important message for anybody who's in the startup game, because you need to be able to sustain this for like years and years and years to get to
Right.
where you want to go.
Now, talking about sustaining things, I mean, your CEO Adam seems special. I listened to his podcast on Jack Altman's
Yeah,
podcast,
he's a
and
one of one.
so I was going to ask you, what do you think are some things that you learned from Adam that he does that other high performing founders and CEOs don't do?
So there's a lot there. I think the first thing that came to mind, I'll share a few things, but the first thing that came to mind is like, I've always been the hardworking guy. Wherever I've been, like, I have been known as that. And then I got to owner, and I'm in a different life stage. Like, I had 2 young kids, but like, Adam crushes me on work ethic. And it was like actually a weird thing for me to deal with, from like a self-esteem and an image perspective, because like that's like what I've been known as. And I was like, oh my God, like, my boss is outworking me like severely. Like, it's not possible. Like, unless I want to be a delinquent father, I cannot actually put in the hours that he does anymore. And that tempo, I think, is so critical, especially in today's world. Like, we're now like starting to get away from the ZERP era, but I still have friends that work at some of these companies that like try to do the work-life balance thing. And the founders are doing a bunch of other stuff other than being psychos in their company. And like, I think if you want to build an exceptional generational company, you have to have that. And I've now been around a bunch of founders that are, that have built or are building like multi-billion-dollar outcomes. And the tempo and intensity that Adam brings from the very top is really important. And he's pretty subtle about it. He doesn't rub this in anybody's face, but you can just like see it. It sort of leaps off the page when, like we have an idea on a Thursday, and then on like Sunday night, he'll send you like a 17-page document that's like extremely thoughtful and well researched, and you're like, oh, like this is like 2 weeks of my work that he like did in like 4 days.
That's just his ChatGPT Pro plan.
Yeah, but this is even before ChatGPT. This was one of the things that struck me and why I left my role at Shopify, which I did not want to leave that job. I loved Shopify. I still love that company, and was in an awesome spot career wise. I just had my second kid. Like, I did not want to go back to startup land, but I spent a bunch of time with Adam because I invested in the company through GTM fund. And then I was doing some advisory work with Adam, and I was just like, oh, if I don't do this, I might just regret this for my entire life after this. I'm just going to see like some crazy update on LinkedIn every year and know that that's the great company that I missed, because they don't come along very often. So back to your question, like lessons from Adam, I think like intensity is one of them. And I've always known that, but like just seeing it at another level and seeing him exude it and have it go through the entire organization, I think is number one. I've been close to some of his like founder mode decisions, and we don't say founder mode. I think it's a little cliched and like misconstrued in many ways, but getting to see the founder mode discussion online and like talking to friends about it, but then like seeing like a version of it with Adam has been interesting, because I think where it comes from is he is arguably closer to the customer than anybody. He like lives and breathes the customer. He started this business for his mom, basically, because his mom started a dog grooming business. It was going under. It was going to cost them like everything they had. And so he rebuilt their digital presence and saved this business. And it's like his mom had a new lease on life. And so like he feels very connected to the mission, and he still is very connected to customers. He like texts and is on calls with customers all the time. And so he has an extremely intuitive understanding of who the customer is. And so when we're making decisions, some things like don't really make a ton of business sense in the short term. But because he knows the customer and he's thinking very long term, like we don't really, he said to me before, he's like, look, like if somebody buys this business for like 2, 3, or $4 billion, he's like, I will have wasted the last like 8 years of my life. And he like really means that. That's not like founder spin or some like jargon. Like from deep inside his body, he believes that. And so when you have a very long-term orientation and a very like deeply rooted connection to the customer, I think you can make these decisions that like sometimes seem contrarian or like not the right things. Like a good example of this is our investment in organic brand. So we started to plow money into organic brand when we were like less than 10 million in ARR. And I can't remember the numbers, but like we spent probably like $1 million on organic brand when we were like a 10 million ARR company. And if anybody's tried to do organic, it has a very long payoff time horizon. And so we were putting a bunch of money into YouTube and Instagram, and it's difficult to track. And even the stuff that we could track, it was just like a trickle of leads. But he knew where our customers live. Our customers don't live on LinkedIn. They don't live like they live on YouTube and Facebook.
YouTube, yeah.
And this is how Hormozy got really big. Like the gym owner customer is a lot like the restaurant owner customer in some ways, like very blue collar, independent SMB. And so we've built up over time with a lot of his personal hours. Like he used to spend like 10 hours every Saturday just recording YouTube and Facebook or Instagram stuff, like every week, like clockwork. And so it was the money in his personal investment, and on something that made no sense in the short term, was like arguably way too early for us, in the company journey to make that scale of brand. But now we have more YouTube and Instagram followers than I think anybody in restaurant tech, like even more than companies like Toast. And he's gotten stopped on the street by restaurant owners being like, "Oh, you're like Adam Guild. I love your YouTube." And now because organic is this compounding asset and it's very difficult to build, so there's a significant moat. Like nobody else can go like, "Oh, I want to have a big organic brand too now." Like, okay, good. I'll see you in 3 years.
Yes.
Um, and he just like had high conviction. And at the time I'm like, wow, that's a big investment of time and money. And I never second guessed it at the time. I've had a lot of trust in him since the beginning, but it did like raise my eyebrows. I'm like, is this the right time? But like, sure, like this is a thing he believes in, so I'm just gonna support it. And sure enough, it's like paid off tremendously. And there's now that we can do the sophistication of testing, and we can understand like the halo effect around our paid ads and all this other stuff. Like now that we have the data architecture to understand what organic is doing, like, yeah, it's this tremendous asset that we've got. And it's this there's like an intangible trust that we're building with the market that like can't be replicated. And so this is an extremely long answer to your question, but
No, I love it though.
yeah, the
I
founder
mean, it's
intuition is real.
I think especially the first point on like his work ethic. I've seen some, I don't know, some VC posted that, and their advice was basically to start early in your career, to spend time with bar raisers, I think he called it. And the idea is
Hmm.
essentially like people who set a completely higher bar that you never thought actually existed, right? And there's so many examples of that. The kid who was always best in math in high school, and then you go to college and you're like, holy shit,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of people who are even way better than me in math. And I think that kind of, you think you're operating at the max, and then you see someone else topping that and you realize, actually, I can do more. I
Yeah.
had a follow-up on that. Given that you do have two children, what is your personal framework on deciding how to balance it? Because obviously you can always work more, you can also always spend an extra hour with your kids. So like, what's your personal trade-off framework?
Yeah. It's really tough. Uh, to be very honest, I think like anybody who said, like, oftentimes you'll hear parents say like, oh, like you just get better at prioritization. You just like learn what's important. You focus on that. I think like people at big companies say that where you can work 40 hours a week and that's all good. For me, it just means sort of cutting out everything else. Like the
Hmm.
only things in my life that I really spend time on are my family, work, and my health.
Hmm.
And like I don't get to see my friends a ton. Like that's definitely like a sacrifice I'm making for this opportunity that I think I have in front of me to build a generational company. And you just have to be like understanding of that. And I do my best to carve out that time. So usually like I'm like laptop closed with the kids by 5:30 p.m. and like I'm dedicated to them until they're asleep at like 8:30. And then I basically work until I go to bed, and which is usually by like 10 o'clock. And then I'm up, and I work out, get to work like by 7:30 or maybe 8 o'clock, and I'm just like ripping as hard as I can.
Yeah.
And you have to delete the other stuff. And so, like when I see my friends, it's like for a bike ride or a run or a workout, or like I'm trying to find, or I see my friends that have kids, I get to see a lot because I can
Hmm.
make those two things happen at the same time. But yeah, like I there's a bunch of people that I haven't seen in a while because they don't have kids and they don't like do the health stuff. And so there's just like not a lot of overlapping opportunity to make space for it. And maybe I will grow to regret that at some point in my life. I don't know, but like that's the trade-off I've made,
Yeah.
because I'm not really like I want to spend all that time with my kids. And like the weekends are pretty sacred. Like I wake up with them in the morning and make breakfast, and we hang out, and I let my wife sleep in. And then I try to do like special stuff with them as much as I can. So like I went out, my daughter and I like went rock climbing, and then got a mani pedi like last weekend.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, like you just got to create space for it.
This is getting very personal, so you don't have to answer it. But
Okay.
also with your wife, do you guys have sacred rules of like one date night a week, like religiously, or because it also, there's stuff that builds up that you need to talk through, but when life's so busy, you might just never get to actually sit down for 2 hours and just talk about what's going on in everyone's life. Do you have any non-negotiables there?
So this is something I should create more space for sure.
Mm.
When you have two young kids, it's really hard to like make space for your personal relationship. So, and like we just moved from Toronto to San Francisco, and we've had a bunch of family stuff happen this summer. So like it is at its like most minimum right now, and we have previously gotten into like a good cadence of like definitely not a date night a week, maybe like a date night a month is like a more reasonable cadence in carving out that time. But it is very difficult. I think like this is a. I think the advice I would give folks here is just like understand that there's seasons in life,
Hmm.
and you just have to embrace that season and understand that things are going to ebb and flow. And like when you've got kids under 5 and 10 years old, like that season of your life is all about them, and you just like want to embrace that time as much as you possibly can, because like they get to become 6, 8, 10 years old and they start having interests of their own, and they have play dates when you're not there, which is like a very different thing, or they don't want you around all the time, and then my wife and I will have more time for each other. But
Yeah.
like while we're here and our kids want us around all the time and we can do that, like we're just sort of embracing it, and like there's nothing in this world that I love more than my kids. Like it is just like such a profoundly meaningful and fulfilling thing that like I can just sort of fill every hour with them and be pretty happy about it.
Love it. Well, I think it's also good to hear that it is difficult, because sometimes people want to frame it that you can kind of have it all and have the perfect balance and crush on all fronts. And now you are,
So let me say one more thing about kids, because
yes.
I think like you just made like a very like subtle but important comment. So before I had kids, what I would always hear from parents, and they're like, oh yeah, like my kids never get in the way of work, or like the line that I always hear is like, you just get better at prioritizing. You just find a way to get more done. And so I had this in the back of my head, but for one reason or another, I was like, I wanted to get myself to a certain career stage before I had kids, so that if kids did affect my ability to do my job, like I was at a place where I'd achieved some checkpoint. And I
Right.
reference I relate it to like video games. It's like once you get to a certain point of a video game, you've got a checkpoint, and even if you die, you go back to that checkpoint. Careers are a lot like that as well. Like once you're at a certain career point, hey, like you're a like certified, competent and functional VP of sales, or like a functional CRO for like a $20 million ARR company. Now you can go get those jobs fairly consistently, and everybody has to determine what that career level is for them. But like I was a VP of sales for 3 years. I took a company from like 0 to 25. I'm like, okay, like I feel like I have enough on my resume now. And that's when I made the move to Shopify. It was pretty
Mhm.
intentional to be at a big company, to have kids. I felt like I had hit that baseline. And what I came to understand is like all those parents telling me it's like, oh, like your kids don't get in your way of work. Like, you can do it all anyways. Like that was bullshit. Like, no, like I went from working 70, 80 hours a week and just like being all consumed to like, I today could not work 80 hours a week without being a delinquent parent.
Mhm.
And I'm just like not willing to do that now. And so I share this lesson with people who are thinking about having kids, because it's
Mhm.
like it might seem harsh or like overly corporate and callous, but it is the reality that like when you choose to have kids, you will just have less hours to work, and that will potentially make you not as good at your job. And or maybe you just like were really bad at prioritizing before, or you didn't work that much, and so you had the hours to swap out. But I think for like people who are high performers, especially if your audience is like founders and early stage founders that are super dialed in and putting in a bunch of effort, like I think having an honest conversation of what the impact of kids are is
Yeah.
important. Like I
Yeah.
would not
My
say
wife and
found
I,
a company and
my wife and I, we have a 2-year-old at home, and I'm only now able to start like working out again since a couple of months. Because between the little baby and running my own company, it just felt like I probably could have if I would have prioritized it, but I don't know. It was one of those things that
but there's
I left on
trade-offs.
the, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like you would have
Now,
had to sacrifice that time out of work.
yeah,
Like there's always
yeah,
life is trade-offs.
yeah. Now you host the revenue leadership podcast, and you had the ability to, besides obviously being one yourself, to interview some of the best revenue leaders and CROs yourself. I was curious. I always find the question of like, what's the difference between a great and an average revenue leader boring? What are some of the themes that you notice that are the difference between an all-time great revenue leader and some of the really good ones? Like, where does that last 1 or 2 or 3% get squeezed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, so I think being able to think holistically about the business is a big differentiator, especially when you talk to founders. So as part of my intake mechanism for the podcast, and I stole this directly from Harry Stebbings, so shout out to Harry, where part of the intake is like, give me the 3 people in business who you are closest with, who
Mm.
you've spent the most time working with, and like, is it okay if I reach out to them? And so I get those names in the email, and then I send them like a standard email. I'm like, hey, like, tell me about Finn. What are his superpowers? Like, are there any awesome stories that I just like have to ask him about? And one of the things that founders say about their CROs, like the really top flight ones that have taken companies to like multi-billion-dollar valuations, is they were able to think beyond sales. And because most people in a CRO seat come from a sales background, there's a smattering of marketing and CS people, but very much the exception, not the rule. And it's really difficult in sales to move away from that lens on everything. And so the great ones are able to plug themselves into product, to be able to make to help the product team get closer to the customer and make better decisions, and be a really helpful partner, and not do what a lot of VPs of sales and CROs do, which is, like, just ask the product team for the last thing that a
Mm-hmm.
really big customer asks them for. So like engaging the right way, or being a really great collaborative partner for customer success, and trading off the sales number for the retention number, because that might be the decision that is most accretive for the business, even though it like can break our brains a little bit to ever sacrifice new ARR. Um, and so I think like and the other piece of it is they can create positive friction, but in a way that pulls everybody up. Like, we use the word bar raiser a lot here, which you used before. And so the elite CROs are the best bar raisers, versus the ones, like from some of the advisory stuff I do, or from like founder friends. The frustration I hear is like, yeah, the my CRO is really good, he's delivering the number, it's just such a pain in the ass. And like like I'm always having to patch things up between him and the CPO, or like the CS team is always frustrated by their team. And so that is like that's more of like a zero sum attitude, versus like the attitude of how do you make everybody better in the entire organization, and how do you be that bar raiser. I think that's one of the biggest things that separates like the good, because everybody's happy to have a CRO that delivers the number, versus like the elite people who never get layered, never get replaced, can go from like very early stage to very, very late stage, like the Chris Degnans, the Rongo Briscoes, like the those types of people who have been through that full journey. that's one of the things that you see, and like, just if you listen to them carefully, that you hear.
Is that also a company culture thing? Because I could imagine that there's some companies where if the CRO comes and says, hey, we're lacking on the product side and we need to redo our product roadmap, or hey, we actually need to like lower our revenue goals so that we can redefine our ICP and fix some churn, that's maybe not always super welcome.
Okay, so this is like, I'm going to get on a slightly different rant here,
Yes.
but this is such a good a good point. So yeah, there is a bit of that in some cultures, and a bunch of not very successful revenue leaders will basically chalk up all of their failings to, well, the CEO, the founder was a dummy, and the VCs were all big bad meanies, and they wanted us to like spend too much money, and they basically like cast blame everywhere else. And as a young VP of sales, one of the things I was really frustrated with was like, it didn't feel like anybody was listening to me. And we didn't really have product market fit, and we were like trying to aggressively scale anyways, even though the market was like really telling us that we didn't have the right to do that. And that company has since gone on and needed to pivot multiple times, and it hasn't grown very fast. And so, like, in hindsight, I was right in that view, but I blamed a lot externally at the time. And now in retrospect, I'm like, well, if you put 2025 Kyle in that seat, I probably could have handled it completely differently. I could have helped bring people along and explain it in like very different language, and being a very different partner on that journey. And so I think there's a lot of blame to go around, because I know that if you had put me in that position, or if you put like Ron Gabrisco, he's the CRO of Databricks from zero to like, how 6 billion ARR. If you put him in that seat, like, that's not happening. Like, that's going to be a completely different conversation. And so CROs and heads of sales like need to take way more accountability for this. And instead of like complaining about the founder and the board, it's like, learn how to manage your board. Like, learn how to not even influence your founder, learn how to collaborate with your founder in a different way. Because oftentimes what you see is like, oh, the CRO goes like, oh, the number's too high, it's not fair. It's like, dude, fair's not a thing here. It's like, the number's too high, which means for the business, we are going to make suboptimal short-term decisions. We are going to sacrifice building enterprise value. And therefore, here's the alternative path that I think we should consider. Like, that's a very different conversation. And so, like, your question is like, is it about company culture? Yes, it is about company culture, but like, you are the CRO, as you are part of the company culture. Arguably, no one outside of the CEO is more influential on the culture of a company than the revenue leader, because your team is going to be the biggest. Like, I manage the biggest team in the company of the functional leaders. This is sort of been true, like, it's true in most companies, unless you're super enterprise and you're more engineers than you are sales reps. And so, like, you just have to take accountability and ownership for it and stop making excuses. And I think once we get to that place, you'll be better off. And just like, read the book The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday to
Yes.
reset how you think about challenges. It's like, okay, like, the CEO is like, wants to do this thing that doesn't make sense, and I don't think, okay, like, good, like, now it's your job to help collaborate and solve that problem, and try to see it from their perspective. Like, put yourself in the shoes of the founder, who is under tremendous pressure and scrutiny from the board, and has to worry about raising the next round, and has to think about all these things that you don't, and then try to get to what you think is the right answer.
Yeah.
So again,
Sounds
like,
also kind of like extreme ownership by Jocko. Now, I
big
was
time.
curious. I mean, there's people on LinkedIn who are way more active than you, but you are active here now. You post every now and then. You are hosting the podcast with Pavilion. You're also doing things like this, and I was just curious, like, what's your What's your motivation? What's your reasoning? Obviously, my audience will never buy owner.com. None of my listeners are restaurant owners. Most of the people who listen to the Revenue Leadership podcast are not, restaurant owners, I assume. So
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
kind of reasoning for being active, building somewhat of a brand for yourself?
So originally, it was all about talent attraction. It was about attracting sales reps, and so the content I used to write was very rep oriented. Over time, and so now I've got like a modest following, like it's just under 40,000, I think. But I have tilted where I spend more and more time towards leadership topics. Like we don't really have a problem with talent attraction, because the interesting thing is, like, once you have a brand, everything is easier. So like one of the things we want to do is get more engaged with universities, because we're trying to hire a lot of folks like straight out of college into these sales roles and just train them from scratch. And I can email the program leader of any sales program or business program of any school in Canada, or like we're hiring in Toronto, so the GTA, and they're like so pumped to have me come in because, oh, I'm like hosting this podcast and I work for this cool company, I got this big following. And so it was all about talent attraction at the beginning, and then I started to build a bit of a following. I was like, oh, like all of these other things are easier, and I started to think about this because of Naval and Seth Godin, talking about the importance of having audience and brand and reputation, just like has all of these other compounding benefits. And so, a lot now, a lot of how I think about myself is like I'm like a important voice to the market, not just in sales hiring, but to the entire talent market. And so there's probably not a lot of like IC engineers listening to this podcast, but there'll be, founders who want to reach out and talk, or VCs, or whoever it is. And these are people that we want to know the name of owner.com, because people might refer folks to us, and even just like feeling like a bigger company than we are has this like really weird halo effect. Even when we were like 10, 15 million ARR, we would go to these restaurant tech shows. People are like, you guys are everywhere, like you're killing it, da 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 da. And we were growing at a good rate, but like we're not growing at cursor rates or anything like that. But it felt like we were a way bigger deal than we were, because like I generated, I don't know, like a few million impressions on LinkedIn in 2024, 2023, or whatever it was. And so that has an effect on people wanting to partner with us, hiring, fundraising, like everything just is like a little bit better. And I get a bunch of really great advisory or angel flow, and I like source deals for GTM Fund and Stage 2, which I'm an LP in, or just friends. Like I got a bunch of friends in venture that I'll send folks to, and there's just this compounding effect where I just sourced a deal for like a really well-known VC with a big platform, and like there's no reciprocal. I don't get like any comp on that, but it's just like a good thing to do. That's like a great
Karma.
relationship, and it's a great relationship. It builds network equity over time, and I just like to do it too. Like I love early stage. I love all of this stuff, and so where I can be helpful, I like to be helpful.
I mean, I'm assuming also for hosting your podcast, it's also kind of a learning and development tool for you.
That's the only reason I started it. Yeah. Like nobody could watch that podcast and I would still do it.
Yeah.
Because, and that was the original reason I started it, is I listened to a lot of podcasts. Like my Spotify Wrapped in 2023 was like 54,000 minutes of podcasts.
What's your number one? 20 VC or?
Yeah, 20 VC was up there. I love Jack Altman's podcast now. That's what I was listening to on my bike ride in, Uncapped. He's a board member, so I'm not being a total suck up. It is actually, it is great. I was listening to the 10% Happier podcast by Dan Harris. I've got a very eclectic taste, so like the Knowledge Project is one of my like tippy top most favorites. I listen to some like,
What would be the most surprising one that like would totally not at all fit what, I don't know, people would expect you to listen to?
Lenny's podcast is a podcast for product people, and that would have been in my top three 100% every year the last 3 years. I think like my podcast is a shameless ripoff on Lenny's podcast. It is Lenny's podcast for revenue people. I've emailed him and told him this. I have like so much respect for him as just like a person. BG2 is awesome with Gerstner and Brad Gurley, or Bill Gurley. Yeah, Knowledge Project. Yeah, Top Line, the Pavilion guys, I love. Dwarkesh is another one that I listen to a lot. Finding Mastery is another one that like I drill episodes on. So like it's sort of like a variety. And so,
do you re-listen to your own episodes?
No, I can't do it.
Chris Walker told me he does this with every single episode he does. I know. I could not continue living.
I know. If I was more serious about it,
it's a smart thing.
Yeah, if I was more serious about like I really want to optimize every little thing and I'm like trying to build a huge audience, I would do it. But at the end of the day, it's a very niche podcast and I'm doing it for like sort of selfish reasons in some ways. Like I listen to a lot of the sales. You notice I didn't really say any sales podcasts in there. 20 sales in the 20 VC feed is probably the best one out there. There's not a lot of great ones. And what I find, like Harry's audience is founders. That's who he's trying to speak to. And so he's asking like founder oriented questions. And so I listen to that pod. I'm like, it's good. And he has the best guests of anybody. But like, I wanted to hear different things, or like they would go down a certain avenue. And I'm like, oh, like pull on that, like go super, like get super deep there. But like, that's not really the point of 20 sales. And so for me, I just wanted a revenue podcast that would go really deep on like way fewer things. This is what Lenny does and why I think his podcast is so great.
Yeah.
And so now, like because I have this platform and when I reach out to people, everybody says yes. And like, again, like you don't really know what your brand is going to be valuable for, but it will be valuable for a bunch of things. So that's why I started it. So now I can reach out and talk to anybody I want, like all the best CROs in the world. It's really great. They're very difficult to pin down and like schedule, but I get 90 minutes a week with
You're not super easy.
Yeah. My apologies for that. And I get 90 minutes a week with somebody that I have like tremendous respect for, and I get to ask them whatever questions I feel like, and so I learn a ton.
Yeah, you previously said this thing about kind of AI companies. I did have this question, and it's kind of a mean question, but do you ever have, I don't know, regret or FOMO? I mean, owner.com is crushing. You just raised your Series C. You guys are growing very fast, and you're not lovable. You're not adding 100 million in 8 months. Do you sometimes have this tingly finger of like wanting to join one of those AI hyperscalers?
I don't, because I love our mission. And like I come from a family of small business people, like multiple generations of entrepreneurs and small business people. I owned that mixed martial arts academy. I like felt all of the pains we solve for our restaurant owner customers. I felt myself like building all of the tech for that business. And I feel like, yeah, maybe from a net worth perspective, I don't even know if like I could go walk in and get that job. That would be arrogant for me to say, but I don't even know if I could. The net worth impact, I think we're going to build a monster company here, and I do think like that will be worth a lot of net worth for me. And I look at the difference between what I expect that to be at owner and what that could be at some AI scaler. A lot more volatility. Like we are growing more consistently. There's a lot less risk in this business on that path to 10 billion plus than there is on all these AI things changing like overnight, and OpenAI killing like hundreds of startups with some new release. So there is a risk reward thing, but like that potential net worth return isn't really worth it for me to like go work on a mission I don't really care that much about. Yeah, like you're reinventing the future, and like you're inventing the way that engineers work. Like it's really cool, and I follow it closely, and I think they're doing amazing work. But I get to help small business people that are like literally the fabric of our communities. Like if you took all of the little local mom and pop restaurants in your neighborhood and you replaced it with Chipotle's, Applebee's, McDonald's, Starbucks, like just do that thought experiment. What happens to your neighborhood?
Yeah.
That sucks. I don't want to live
Yeah.
there. Like it, and they are under tremendous existential pressure from all of the big multinational restaurant chains, and the companies that are putting tremendous pressure on them from all around. And if I can help give them the tools and help like a salt of the earth person, you know, like not just survive as a business, but like keep their livelihood, it's pretty meaningful work. And it's
Yeah.
easy to get up in the morning, and like I really felt this at Shopify in a profound way. Um, so I don't really get the FOMO.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of the brand, but Lab Coffee is currently spreading like wildfire here in Berlin, and it's kind of like the new generation of Starbucks.
Okay.
And I think it started by some MBA type people,
Mm.
and I somehow like have zero desire to check them out. They also have this like blue branding, which just looks so uncozy. I don't know. I'm hating on them for no reason, but question: you guys do SMB sales. Can you give me like one or two very specific ways you guys are using AI, like tactically in your day to day, that's actually affecting your
Yeah.
reps and productivity and output?
Yeah. We have 7+ production use cases that I would say are producing a lot of value. Um, we were really early. Like we were doing waterfall enrichment before it was a thing. Like before Clay burst on the
Mm-hmm.
scene, like we actually built our own waterfall enrichment with AI scrapers and tooling. Like or that's our VP of BizOps, Jonathan Shankman, who built it all from scratch and is like a mad scientist. So like I would say start with the data foundations, first party and third party data. The third party stuff is understand your market in great detail, figure out the accounts you should go after, enrich them with the information you need to have relevant outreach, then find all the people you need to talk to, and then enrich those with relevant
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and then get super accurate contact data. We use a company called Data Lane for that now,
Mm-hmm.
which does a lot of what we previously had built in house. So that's the third party data. Start there. Don't worry about AI outreach. Don't worry about like anything fancy. Just like get your data foundations there. And then the first party stuff is, do you understand everything that's happening in your customer
Mm-hmm.
journey, and is that well instrumented? And that's momentum for us. I was
Mm-hmm.
like one of their first 3 or 5 customers. We were the first customer on their conversation intelligence platform. We ripped out Gong in favor of it, because now I know everything that's happening across the entire customer journey, and I can turn all of that unstructured data into structured data in Salesforce or Snowflake fields. And so once you have those two things, now all of the like cool AI use cases that you layer on top will actually work, because AI is a pattern recognition machine. But if you give it crappy data and bad patterns, it's going to give you like bad outputs. And so momentum is like, it automates all the CRM filling out for the sales reps. It saves them a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of time, and it gives me like 10 times more data than I could possibly ask a rep to fill in proactively, or like on their own. And then we've got Avara, which is our AI sales simulator for sales rep practice, massively impactful. The reps who spend time in there get better at a way faster rate. That's a great tool. We've got OneMind, which is like one of the last use cases we put in place, which is the sort of AI BDR thing. We don't have it as an AI BDR. We have an AI version of Adam that is like an education superhuman. So you can go to our website. So this is another AI use case. You can enter in your restaurant's website, and then we do this AI website grader. We pull in everything you could possibly know about somebody's digital presence, and we do this big, huge analysis. But it's a lot of information, and restaurant owners aren't always like super tech savvy. So AI Adam is there to explain everything in like plain terms. You can ask him anything you want. Adam wrote this book about restaurant marketing. You can talk to him about the book. You can literally ask anything about restaurant marketing, your specific report, how you should improve your specific business, and he can answer. So that's only been in market for a month or two, but like really promising results. Pavlov, we're doing a bunch of like post-sale journey, or like onboarding and post-sale journey incentive management and AI customer journeys. Yeah, those are
Do you know
probably
the keeper test for like employees? Like
yeah
essentially, if they
yeah.
would tell you they would want to leave, you would try everything that you could to keep them. Are any
Mhm.
of those workflows that would pass the keeper test at this point?
Yeah, basically all of them.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
I
is it
didn't mention the ones that failed.
okay?
So
Yeah.
we've only had like one or two not like really not work.
Mm,
And I think part of the reason that we've picked well is like because of the amount of time I've spent doing angel and advisory and the venture thing.
mm,
Like I can't take all the credit. A lot of it's luck, but like if you learn how venture capitalists invest, then you can be much better at picking the right like seed and series A stage technologies to use, because you're really just trying to pick the winner. There's going to be a bunch of
right.
companies in a category, and whose tech is better today is largely irrelevant. For me, it's like, do you have a more aligned worldview of how I see this category playing out, and do I think you as founders have the ability to win that category? So
Maybe
that
I
was
can
Avara, that was Momentum, that was Datalane.
maybe I can squeeze one last question. And I saw
Yeah.
that Jason Lemkin is an investor. I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of his. Do you interact with him, or have you interacted with him in any way?
Yeah, yeah, he's on our board, so we spend a bunch of time.
What's maybe one lesson, one thing, one insight that you took away from interacting with Jason?
Man, so many. So I had him on my podcast, and I asked him
Mm,
about board management, and he like let it rip. He was so open and transparent and was like incredibly valuable on it. It's still one of my favorite episodes. So like one of the things he said on the episode was, he's like, run towards bad news. He's like, when bad things are happening, let your board know right away. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't like try to, skate around it. Like tell them what's not working, and that will build so much more trust and credibility. Like he's really big on trust. That's number one. Number two is like, his I think like his online persona can come across as like a little bit grumpy and like pessimistic, but it actually comes from a place of like such kindness, and the lesson there is like clarity is kindness. And so he endeavors to always be the board member that will like tell you the thing that you need to hear, that maybe
mm,
some board members don't want to say, because founder NPS is how you're going to get referred to your next deal. And so if you're just like a really friendly board member, and you're always like, if you always have the founders back, they're like, oh, I love this board member, and you're going to
right.
refer that board member to your friends who are raising money. But Jason, and he said this publicly, so I'm like not like speaking out of turn, but I think his belief is the kind thing to do is tell the founder what they actually need to hear, even though they might not totally want to hear it. It's like, hey, like that executive is like not good enough. It's like, that's an uncomfortable thing, and maybe that's going to like hurt your founder NPS, but they need to hear it, and that's a super valuable lesson. And I try to take that into how I manage my team
I love it.
and interact with
I love
people.
it.
Okay.
He gives me very old school, like integrity over everything vibes. Kyle,
He's the man. I will say Lemkin is the man. So
yeah,
if you're a founder, you want to raise money, like he's invaluable to have on your cap table.
love it. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to check you out, I'll link up both your LinkedIn, your podcast, and then owner.com in the show notes. And yeah, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate the invite. This was fun.